May 10th, 1864, Northern Virginia, the Battle of Spotsylvania. A sultry, cloudy afternoon, the ground damp from the previous day's rain. The Third Maine Infantry Regiment had been held in reserve all day, waiting, anxious. In the distance, bursts of artillery and gunfire. Smoke thickened the air, tainting the golden light of the approaching twilight. Their orders came. They were to move forward as part of an assault. Their mission was to take a Confederate breastworks along the Po River. Musket gripped tightly in his hands, Amos Bean, a private with the 3rd Maine, charged across the battlefield. Amos was 20 yards from the enemy line when a bullet ripped through his left thigh. He tried to turn and retreat, using his rifle as a crutch. He hobbled a few steps before a second bullet struck his right hip. Amos fell to the wet grass. The assault failed. Bugles sounded the retreat. The 3rd Maine broke and scattered. Men ran for their lives. Chaos engulfed the battlefield. Left behind were the 3rd Maine's dead and wounded, including Amos Bean. The men took stock of their losses as the 3rd Maine regrouped that evening. And that's when Company D made a grim discovery. Their captain was missing. Captain Alfred S. Merrill, a 39-year-old ship's carpenter from Bath, Maine, the man who had been leading them for nearly 2 years. In the chaos of the battle, they had lost sight of Captain Merrill. No one knew what had happened to him, and his whereabouts were unknown. He would never return. For more than 160 years, Captain Merrill's fate has been a mystery. Until today. Today on Company D, we solve the mystery of the missing captain. Hello and welcome to the first episode of Company D, a history podcast that brings to life the forgotten stories of the everyday soldiers from the American Civil War. Company D embodies microhistory by focusing on a single regiment, the 3rd Maine Volunteer Infantry Regiment, specifically the soldiers from Company D. For those unfamiliar with the American Civil War, a regiment consisted of 1,000 soldiers. Regiments were divided into 10 companies of 100 men, named using the first letters of the alphabet. Therefore, one regiment would have 10 companies from A to K, skipping the letter J to avoid confusion with the letter I in written communications. The Company D podcast will focus on the stories of the soldiers who fought with Company D of the 3rd Maine Infantry Regiment. These are the men and their families from Mid-Coast Maine and the city of Bath. They are carpenters, farmers, housewives, and fishermen. Regular people. By choosing one regiment and one company, we hope to tell a bottoms-up perspective of the American Civil War, arguably the most significant historical event to shape the United States. All the stories we'll share on Company D are about real people and real events. Every story is meticulously researched and as factually accurate as possible. But while we hope to present a very personal and human face on the American Civil War, our primary goal is to tell compelling and fascinating stories. Adventure stories, romances, tales of mystery and intrigue, and stories about heroes and cowards, good people and bad. As the writer Sue Monk Kidd once said, stories have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here. We aren't letting these stories die because they deserve to be told. Why the 3rd Maine and Company D? Because this is personal. My great-great-grandfather, Charles F. Snell, fought for Company D. He was an 18-year-old volunteer who left behind a diary of his experiences. A diary that has become the foundation and inspiration for this podcast. So get ready for a different take on the American Civil War. We take you beyond the generals and the politicians, beyond the politics and the battle strategies. Together, we'll uncover the mostly forgotten stories of the individual soldiers. Welcome to Company D. I'm your host, George F. Snell III. In our first episode, we're going to solve a mystery to find out what really happened to Captain Alfred S. Merrill, the third and final captain of Company D, the highest-ranking officer of the company who vanished on the Spotsylvania battlefield less than a month away from fulfilling his 3-year volunteer term, a man on the verge of going home. Captain Merrill's fate has been the subject of speculation for more than 160 years. Well, speculate no more. We turn Sherlock Holmes today on Company D and solve the mystery of the missing captain. We find Alfred S. Merrill. Chapter 1, The Farm Boy. Alfred S. Merrill was born on July 23, 1825, in the quiet inland town of Pownell, Maine. Pownell was a farming community 25 miles west of Bath, a town of about 1,000 people, a community built on faith, family, and hard work. Alfred's grandfather was one of the town's first settlers and a founding member of the Pownell Congregational Church. Church was an important part of the Merrills' life in Pownell. The family was well known in the town for their musical talents, especially their singing. Their voices would fill the white-clappered church on Sunday mornings, their harmonies echoing up to the rafters. The whole family joined in, grandpas and grandmas, aunts and uncles, fathers and mothers, even the children. Let's face it, the Merrills were the Partridge family of Pownell, Maine, sans the painted bus. Alfred grew up on a farm, on land originally cleared by his grandfather. His parents, Edward Merrill and Sarah Blackstone, were married in Pownell on Christmas Eve, 1819. Yes, it's near certain that the Merrill family did a lot of singing on that day. Alfred was the third of 10 children. Alfred's father was a successful farmer, his land valued at $4,000, the equivalent of about $400,000 today. Their 150-acre farm blended fields and woodland. They raised cattle, horses, oxen, and sheep. In 1860, the farm produced 500 bushels of Irish potatoes, 140 bushels of oats, 800 pounds of cheese, and enough butter, hay, and wool to keep the household and the local market well supplied. The Merrill farm no longer exists today, but the road it sat on, Merrill Road, still does. Off of that road is Merrill Cemetery, a grassy field surrounded by trees and behind an old fence. That's where Alfred's parents and many of his family were laid to rest. But Alfred isn't there. He wasn't destined to die in Pownell or to be a farmer. There were no quiet fields in his future. Chapter 2, Desperately Seeking Alfred. Alfred's biography gets murky when he reaches young adulthood. By 1850, when he's 25, he's no longer living in Pownell with his parents. So where did he go? We don't know for certain, but the evidence points to California. 3 of his younger brothers, Giles, Lewis, and Leander, were there. They were all in San Francisco in the early 1850s. His brother Edward would head to California after the Civil War. So did Alfred go with them? A census record from 1850 places an Alfred S. Merrill in Sierra County, California. So was it him? It's possible. But there's a complication. The record states that this Alfred S. Merrill had previously lived in Louisiana, not Maine. But it could still be our Alfred, because in the 1800s, Mid-Coast Maine had deep ties to Louisiana. Maine shipbuilders supplied the sugarcane and cotton trade, linking places like New Orleans and Bath in a vast maritime network. Many Maine captains and ship owners owned property in Louisiana and had personal and business connections there. If Alfred went to Louisiana first, it's possible he secured work there through these connections. If the census record is correct, by 1850, Alfred, like his brothers, was in California. And in 1850, there was only one reason for a farm boy from Maine to go to California: gold. The California Gold Rush. In 1848, gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, and within months, the entire country was gripped by gold fever. Between 1848 and 1855, 300,000 people, mostly young men, flooded to California with dreams of striking it rich. They became known as the 49ers, just like the football team. Alfred's younger brothers eventually settled in San Francisco. What happened in San Francisco encapsulates the impact of the gold rush. Before the gold rush, San Francisco was an unimportant outpost of 200 people. By 1852, it had swelled to 36,000 residents, becoming a major port city and an economic center for the new state of California. Some of the earliest 49ers got filthy rich, mining thousands of dollars in gold each day. But as more prospectors poured in, the fewer succeeded. Sierra County was where many ended up. The Sierra Nevada is a rugged region filled with cold rivers and breathtaking waterfalls. If Alfred was in Sierra County, he joined 16,000 other miners there. He likely spent long stretches in a tent, panned for gold in the north and middle forks of the Yuba River, and moved on whenever gold was found in a new area. Alfred, like most of the 49ers, didn't strike it rich. While his brothers stayed in California, Alfred headed back home to Maine. Chapter 3: Soul-Crushing Sorrow. Back in Maine, Alfred settled in Bath, a city renowned for its shipbuilding. He became a ship's carpenter at one of the dozens of shipyards lining the Kennebec River. At some point in the mid to late 1850s, Alfred met Abigail McIntosh. He called her Abby. He was 14 years her senior. Abby was the second of 7 children born to Alexandra McIntosh and Hannah Jordan. Her father was a laborer and a firefighter with the Bath Fire Department. Abby was close to her siblings, Hannah, Jeremiah, Elizabeth, Francis, George, and William. There's no record of when Alfred and Abby got married, but by 1860, they lived together in Bath with a newborn son named Melvin. For a time, it must have seemed like a new beginning, but tragedy was about to strike. And once it did, it would be relentless. (1854). That's when the first blow struck, likely before Alfred and Abby were even married. Alfred's sister Roxana died in March. She was 27 years old and recently married. 6 months later, Abby's brother Jeremiah lost his wife Susan. She died at 20. Then Jeremiah followed. He was dead by the age of 24. 3 young adults cut down in their prime. We don't know the cause, but there was an outbreak of cholera in nearby Lewiston that year. More than 200 people died. Could the Merrill and McIntosh families have caught the disease? Whatever the cause, the rapid succession of death must have been a blow to Alfred and Abby. Little did they know the worst was yet to come. In the winter of 1860, the unthinkable. Their infant son, Melvin, only 10 months old, not even walking yet, was the next victim. Melvin was laid to rest at Maple Grove Cemetery in Bath. As his grieving parents stood over the fresh earth, they couldn't have known the terrible truth. Melvin would not be alone for very long. Soon, one of them would be joining him. Chapter 4: Becoming a Bluebelly. Abby's youngest brother, 12-year-old William, came to live with his sister soon after Melvin's death. Abby's parents lived just 3 houses down and probably sent William to live with Abby to help her through her grief. We don't know how Melvin's death affected Alfred and Abby, but we do know that once the Civil War broke out in April of 1861, Alfred was among the first volunteers. He enlisted with Company D of the Third Maine Infantry Regiment. The Civil War had been brewing for decades, but after Abraham Lincoln's election in November of 1860, the wheels came off. The South saw Lincoln as a threat to slavery. In December, they seceded. First South Carolina, followed by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. They formed the Confederate States of America and named Jefferson Davis president. Then came Fort Sumner. Confederate forces bombarded the U.S. fort for 34 hours. No one was killed, but the fort surrendered and the Civil War began. Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to crush the rebellion, and more Southern states joined the Confederacy. Across the North, men responded with a frenzy of patriotism and enlistments. In Bath, Alfred was personally recruited by Charles A.L. Sampson, who would soon be appointed the first captain of Company D. Alfred collected a bounty of $34 and signed his name. He was appointed 4th Sergeant of Company D. Alfred was 35 years old. He cut an imposing figure. He stood 5 feet 7.5 inches tall with a dark complexion, brown hair, and blue eyes. In a photograph taken of Alfred in 1864, he wears a double-breasted frock coat with brass buttons, typical of Union Army officers. He has a square jaw, a bushy mustache and goatee, and thick, dark hair. He looks dashing, like a man of action. There's a passing resemblance to the actor Daniel Day-Lewis. Maybe Alfred was thinking about Abby. He had to know that leaving behind his wife so shortly after the death of their only child would be hard on her. She was only 22 years old. When he left with the 3rd Maine for the training grounds in Augusta in June, Alfred must have known there was a chance he'd never see his young wife again. And truth be told, we don't know if he ever did. Chapter 5: War is a force that gives us meaning. Alfred proved to be an outstanding soldier. He was promoted to 2nd lieutenant within months of enlisting. He was promoted after Captain Charles A.L. Sampson was bumped to major. William H. Watson became the 2nd captain of Company D. Watson saw something in Alfred. Company D needed a leadership reshuffle under Watson, and Watson knew exactly who he wanted. He handpicked Alfred to be his 1st lieutenant. His second choice was Sergeant Woodbury Hall for 2nd lieutenant. To Watson, Alfred was everything a soldier should be: trustworthy, faithful, and loyal. But there may have been another reason Watson chose him. Watson was a wealthy, educated Bath merchant. Alfred wasn't. He was a farmer's son, a carpenter. He had no family wealth or political connections. Even his writing gave him away. Alfred's letters are often riddled with misspellings, poor syntax, and the rough grammar of a man with limited schooling. So to Watson, that may have made Alfred the perfect second in command: loyal, reliable, and non-threatening. Not everyone agreed with Watson's choices. The promotion process got ugly. We'll cover that fight in a later episode. But for now, just know that Company D got a new second in command, 1st Lieutenant Alfred S. Merrill. With his promotion, the regiment gained a leader unlike any before him. Captain Sampson was a wealthy artisan. Captain Watson, a successful businessman. Alfred was something else. A man forged in hard labor on a farm and in the shipyards. And within a year, he would be the 3rd and final captain of Company D. But before that happened, Alfred would be struck down on the battlefield. Chapter 6. First Blood. May 31st, 1862. The Battle of Fair Oaks. The battle ended in a bloody stalemate, but was a disaster for the Third Maine. 1/3 of the regiment was killed, wounded, or captured. The Third Maine was part of Major General David Birney's 2nd Brigade. Their orders were to cross the Chickahominy River at Savage Station and attack the Confederate left flank. But for some reason, General Birney halted his troops and formed a battle line, and then did nothing. The 2nd Brigade didn't move for the rest of the night. Birney was court-martialed and stripped of his command for disobeying orders and holding back his troops less than a mile from the battlefield. The charges were eventually dropped and the matter recast as a misunderstanding. Birney was reinstated to his command. But Birney's hesitation didn't prevent the 2nd Brigade from combat. They saw it the next day, on June 1st, with the 3rd Maine leading the way. In the late afternoon, Confederate troops overran the Union front line and slammed into the 3rd Maine. The battle was close combat, brutal. Muskets and pistols fired at point-blank range. Rifles used as clubs. Men stabbed each other with bayonets. But somehow they held on and repelled the rebel advance. But the cost was enormous. The regiment had been shredded. Alfred was shot in the arm during the fray. He was among 7 wounded in Company D. Others included Corporals William Higgins, Samuel Merry, and Henry Shaw, and Privates Benjamin Brookings, Hartley Dutton, Richard Dixon, and Newman Kennerson. Major General Philip Kearny Jr., the hard-charging commander of the 3rd Corps, gave high praise to the 3rd Maine for its valor and courage during the battle. Alfred survived the Battle of Fair Oaks. He was lucky. But Abby wasn't as fortunate. Back in Bath, Abby's sister Frances died in the early morning hours of April 10th, 1863. Another loss for Abby, her dear sister passing away to add to her grief. We don't know the cause, but shortly after Frances was laid to rest, Abby fell ill. The evidence points to tuberculosis, but we just don't know. Abby lingered, then passed away on June 14th. She was only 24 years old. Abby was buried at Maple Grove Cemetery next to her infant son, Melvin. Now Alfred's entire family was gone. He was alone. This was the man who 11 months later, in Spotsylvania, vanished on the battlefield. Let's return now to the Battle of Spotsylvania on May 10th, 1864, the day that Private Amos Bean was shot twice and fell on the battlefield, and the day that Company D lost their 3rd and final captain in the chaos of the battle. Chapter 7. The Last Captain. The confusion about what happened to Alfred played out in the newspapers back in Bath. On May 17th, the Bath Daily Sentinel and Times reported Captain Merrill, Company D, killed. A week later, on May 24th, the newspaper walked back its initial report. Now it reported Merrill was supposed to be killed. 4 days later, on May 28th, 3rd Maine Surgeon Thaddeus Hildreth wrote a letter to the Sentinel and Times to correct the report. Merrill, he said, was missing. In 2 weeks, Alfred had gone from killed to possibly wounded to missing in action. Then on June 2nd, a new twist. Colonel Moses B. Lakeman, commander of the 3rd Maine, said Alfred had been shot in the leg and taken prisoner. Now, Alfred was wounded and a POW. The uncertainty continued. On May 20th, Lieutenant Woodbury Hall, Alfred's second in command, said Alfred was either dead or a prisoner. That certainly didn't clear things up. The truth was, even months after his disappearance, the soldiers of Company D had no idea what happened to their captain. The regiment even listed Alfred as being discharged from service. Even after the war, the confusion remained. In 1866, the Third Maine's final report to the state indicates that Alfred survived the war and was mustered out of service with the rest of the regiment. But Alfred never came home. The citizens of Bath, when they erected a monument to the Civil War dead in 1867, added Alfred's name to the stone, honored as one of the fallen. So what really happened to Alfred Merrill? There's one man who has the answer. Remember Amos Bean from Company E, the private left wounded on the Spotsylvania battlefield? Amos has the answer. Chapter 8. Amos tells his tale. Rain pattered on the tin roof of an old slave shanty on the outskirts of Spotsylvania, Virginia, 2 days after Amos Bean was shot and captured by the rebels. 21-year-old Amos lay inside on a filthy straw mattress with dozens of other wounded soldiers, mostly Confederates. Amos had 2 bullet wounds, one in the left thigh and the other in the right hip. He was in a lot of pain, but even the wounds weren't as bad as his growing thirst and hunger. He hadn't eaten or drunk in more than 48 hours. A Confederate surgeon had treated his wounds and left him in the cabin. He wasn't sure if he was going to live. Finally, a few hours later, Amos was given a tin plate with a slice of bread soaked in ham fat and a cup of coffee made of burnt rice. The food made him feel better. Feeling more alert, he noticed the dark outline of a rebel soldier, a silhouette against the open door. The soldier made his way to Amos and crouched down next to him. "They tell me you belong to the Third Maine Regiment," the soldier said. "What company?" Amos told him Company E. The soldier wanted to know if Amos knew the captain of Company D. Of course he did. He told the soldier Company D's captain was Alfred Merrill. That's when the soldier handed Amos a book, perhaps a Bible or a diary. Amos never specified. The soldier told him they were the last effects of Captain Merrill. He told Amos that Merrill had died hours earlier at a Confederate hospital tent from a gunshot wound. Before he passed, Alfred pleaded with the rebel soldier, who was an orderly at the hospital, to find another soldier from the Third Maine and give him his belongings. "Get them home to my family," Alfred had pleaded. The soldier pressed the book into Amos's hands. The message was clear. It was now Amos's job to get Merrill's belongings back to his family in Bath. Amos survived his wounds. He was taken to the notorious Andersonville prison in Georgia, a place where thousands of Union soldiers died from disease, starvation, and exposure. While locked up in Andersonville, Amos managed to write officials in Bath, desperate to return Alfred's things. The postmaster instructed him to write McIntyre, which was likely William McIntosh, Alfred's now 16-year-old brother-in-law, Abby's youngest brother who moved in with them after Melvin's death. Finally, Amos was able to mail Alfred's things to Bath, but they never arrived. But thanks to Amos Bean's diary, a document resurfaced by Amos's ancestors more than 150 years after the war, we now know what happened to Captain Alfred S. Merrill. At 39 years old, he died of gunshot wounds as a prisoner of war. No one knows what happened to his body or where he is buried. There is a tombstone for Alfred next to his wife and child at Maple Grove Cemetery in Bath. But Alfred doesn't rest with Abby and Melvin. Like his possessions, he never made it home. That brings us to the end of the mystery of the missing captain and the first episode of Company D. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'd love to hear from you. Please visit our website or engage with us on social media. If you want to listen to more of our episodes, please subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. Our website has additional information about the podcast and Captain Merrill. including 2 photographs of him. Company D would like to extend a very special thank you to Barry York for sharing Amos Bean's diary with us. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, George F. Snell III. See you next time. And remember, if you're going to have a war, make it civil.
Company D is a product of Dark Party Productions, all rights reserved. Unauthorized retention, duplication, distribution, or modification of copyrighted materials is strictly prohibited by law. Company D is written, hosted, and produced by George F. Snell III. Our editor and co-producer is Jay Brewer. The Company D theme music was written and composed by Jay Brewer. Sound effects and additional music were provided under Creative Commons License 0 by Freesound, Sound Bible, and the Library of Congress. We'd also like to thank Richard Moore for his Civil War battle sounds on Freesound. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any organization. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional advice. The content is provided as is with no guarantees of accuracy, completeness, or timeliness.